Did you know that Formula One driver and Le Mans winner Nico Hulkenberg once raced an open wheel car on an oval? I'm not talking about the test he did with the Arrow McLaren IndyCar team a few years ago. That was on a road course. What I'm talking about was over a decade earlier. This is the story of the Eastside 100 and the car that Hulkenberg drove in it, the Ligier JS47. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that introduction, isn't there? Nico Hulkenberg has had a long and somewhat interrupted F1 career, but the car and the race this video is about came before he'd ever stepped foot in a Formula One Grand Prix car. Indeed, it was only in his second ever season of racing cars that the German driver made his oval racing debut. As the reigning Formula BMW Germany champion, he made the decision to step into German Formula 3 with the Joseph Kaufmann racing squad for the 2006 season. Back then, Formula 3 was quite different. It wasn't a one-make championship like it is now, with all of its races running on the Formula 1 calendar. Instead, it was a multi-chassis, multi-engine class with a whole range of different championships. German F3 was one of the bigger series, but certainly not the biggest. I really do miss those days of Formula 3. In 2006, 6 manufacturers made Formula 3 cars. Dome, which was thought to have the best car out there, but it never raced outside of Japan. Dallara, which was the most common car. British company Lola. Italian startup SLC. French manufacturer Miguel. And lastly, Ligier. And it was the last of these that Hulkenberg would drive in the German Championship. Yes, I do mean that Ligier, the very same brand which raced at Le Mans and in Formula 1 between 1976 up until the team was sold to Alain Prost at the end of the 1996 season. Many thought that the Prost JS45 would be the last ever Ligier racing car, but they were very wrong. By the early 1990s, the Ligier team was in some economic difficulty and Guy Ligier sold the team. It continued to operate under his name for a few years, but despite scoring a shock win at the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix, it was later sold on to Alain Prost and became Prost Grand Prix. At that point, Guy Ligier was out of the racing business and he went on to set up a new car company using the same branding that he'd used in Formula 1. And that company was dedicated to building microcars, and it was a huge success, and it's still going to this day. However, after almost a decade out of motorsport, Guy Ligier wanted to make a return to motor racing, and an opportunity presented itself. French racing car constructor Automobiles Martini had been struggling for years, and Ligier acquired it in 2004. With that acquisition came 3 new products. Firstly, there was a new racing school car already in production, the Martini Mark 84. That would be rebranded to be the Ligier Mark 84. However, Ligier had its sights on bigger things. He hired former F1 engineer Gilles Alagoe to head up the new technical department and had 2 fresh projects in mind: a return to sports car racing with a new FIA CN regulation car called the JS49 and a brand new Formula 3 car, the JS47. This new F3 car was not a small project. It underwent extensive aerodynamic development in the F1 specification Aero Concept Engineering wind tunnel at Magny-Cours. The final car had a distinctively high nose with a rather flat shape. The centre section of the front wing featured a slight dip running across most of its span. The car featured double wishbone suspension all round with pushrod actuated dampers. The lower front wishbones picked up on the front of the chassis in a single keel arrangement. The car's roll hoop was surprisingly thin, bolted onto the upper section of the chassis. It must have been a lighter and lower drag design than that seen on the Lola or even the Dallara. The transmission on the Ligier had a bespoke single-piece cast gearbox casing and bell housing to give Alagoe complete freedom over the car's rear suspension layout, but it did use the near-universal Hewland FTR internals. You can see the inboard suspension pickup points on the bell housing in this image. Note that the engine is only semi-stressed with a bracing member linking the rear of the chassis bulkhead to the bell housing. Hulkenberg's Ligier was fitted with a 2-litre normally aspirated 4-cylinder engine from Opel breathing through a air restrictor. The engine was tuned by Spice. It was a very common choice in German F3, but Mercedes, Renault, Honda and Toyota were all represented that season. All of those engines also had to be remapped to race on an oval. The cooling system of the car was developed in the wind tunnel, but the side pod design was pretty conventional. Compare the Ligier here to the Lola. Here's a nice look under the bodywork with a clear view of the layout of the coolers on the right hand side of the car. From the rear you can see the centerline cooling outlets. There's nothing new with those F1 designs, is there? And have a look just at the top of this picture. Just look how young Hulkenberg looks here. The 2006 season started really well for Hulkenberg. He drove the Ligier to pole position at Oschersleben on its debut, and indeed Hulkenberg's F3 debut. His and the car's first win would come at the second round of the year at Hockenheim. He would go on to score fastest laps at Assen and the Salzburg Ring, and he would also get the fastest lap at the Lausitz Ring. There were 2 dates on the calendar at the Eurospeedway. The first race at May, where Hulkenberg got the fastest lap, would be run on the road course, but the second date, held in July, would be run on the oval. This was to be the Eastside 100, an all-out oval race for Formula 3 cars. It would be the fastest race run in Europe since the kart German 500 in 2003. Eastside 100 referred to the fact that the race was run in the former East Germany, and 100 for the distance of the 2 Formula 3 races, each of which was just under 100 kilometres. This would be the second time that German F3 had run on the 3.3 kilometre tri-oval, having the inaugural Eastside 100 the year earlier in 2005. In that event, the F3 cars proved to be about 10 seconds a lap slower than the kart Lolas used in 2003. The track itself had opened in 2000, but its origins can be traced all the way back to the communist GDR, where the state planned to convert an old open-cast coal mine into a motor racing circuit. The fall of that regime meant that the project never really got anywhere, but it was later revived as a direct replacement for the Avus circuit in Berlin. However, with kart no longer coming to Germany and the German 500 no longer taking place, the circuit lacked a major headline event each season, so the Eastside 100 was created to be the premier oval race in Europe, and one which would give young drivers a taste of what they might expect to find if they ever went on to race in IndyCar. In that first year of the Eastside 100, the 2005 race, it was an all-Dallara affair, but for 2006 some new regulations had been introduced into Formula 3 and a lot of manufacturers had got involved. The Eastside 100 for 2006 was clearly going to be a battle of the manufacturers. British constructor Lola wanted to prove that its B0630 Formula 3 car was very much a match for the Dallara F306, which had dominated the market globally at that point. SLC from Italy had also entered its low-drag R1 concept in its first season as well, and it wanted to prove itself against its more established rivals. And into this mix came Hulkenberg with his unique Ligier chassis. As an aside, Ligier once actually tried to build an IndyCar, and it was an absolute disaster. It didn't really do very well on road courses, and it tested once on an oval and then was abandoned. We'll have to try and get back to that story. Anyway, back to the 2006 Eastside 100. Lola came into the event as favourite. Its cars had been strong against the Dallaras all season, and in fact had won all bar 2 races by that point. Hulkenberg had won one of the other races in his Ligier, and Johnny Cecotto Jr. had also won a race in his Italian SLC chassis. Looking to preserve its advantage, Lola actually did a specific wind tunnel testing program for the oval, and when series organisers got wind of this, they secretly photographed every car at the preceding race to stop manufacturers building Eurospeedway specials. They announced this to the teams, and the teams sort of accepted it, but despite this ruling, the teams did make some changes to the car. Lola, for example, relocated the rear view mirrors to the outer edge of the side pods on some of its entries to reduce drag, and it also tightened up the side pod ducts. In fact, you can see the inserts here painted black to be less obvious, but fooling nobody. SLC, on the other hand, changed its entire cooling system to be run at a much higher average speed, and pretty much every car ran revised wings front and rear. One Dallara was fitted with an additional mesh gauze in front of its airbox, and yes, that is a T-strainer, and no, I can't explain that fully. Suspension stagger was induced in the cars too, meaning that they weirdly crabbed down the pit lane, and setup became a bit of a challenge because the weather that weekend was a little bit uncertain. There'd been some rain in the area, and it wasn't announced until 90 minutes before the first race was due to start whether the race would actually take place on the oval or the road course, leading to some frantic setup changes at the last minute. The thing is, when these Formula 3 cars were designed, oval racing was not really considered, which unfortunately caused major issues for one driver. Cornish driver Joey Foster had crashed his Lola badly in practice and suffered major spinal injuries. It soon became clear that the form book was accurate and the Lolas were indeed the fastest fastest cars in the field. However, Hulkenberg was very fast in the Ligier as well, and it didn't seem to be a one-sided race. However, the Lola teams had a secret weapon. The British constructor had put its cars through a CFD program to see the best ways and positions for the drivers to draft in on the circuit, and it fed this information through to all of the drivers driving Lolas in the race. And it seemed that at least one Dallara-backed team had done the same sort of thing. In the races, the Lolas started to work as a team, with the drivers drafting in pairs and sometimes even in threes, as did that Dallara team. Hulkenberg, on the other hand, while he was very fast, he was just on his own on the Ligier and had nobody to work with, and it really cost him in the races. Trying to work through the pack, the German driver tangled with a Dallara in the first race and lost the lead lap and his front wing. For the second 100-kilometre race, Hulkenberg qualified fourth, which was really impressive, but the Dallara and Lola teamwork again left him isolated, and he dropped back through the field, finishing 8th. It was Hulkenberg's first and to date only experience of racing on an oval. Many years later, when asked about racing in IndyCar at a point where his career looked a little bit uncertain, he told the media, "I've got a lot of respect for those who race on ovals, it's just not my thing." Most at the time didn't realise he was talking from experience. So it was interesting that a couple of years later he tested a Dallara-built Arrow McLaren IndyCar, but quickly announced that he would not be pursuing that direction in his career. It was 2021 and he was out of a permanent F1 drive, but he returned to the sport in 2022 with Haas, and he's since joined Sauber, ready for its transition into Audi in 2026. The Ligier JS47 continued in German F3 for the 2007 season, or at least for half of it anyway. Once again, it was run by Joseph Kausmann Racing. They ended up running two drivers, Johannes Vierbold for one race weekend and Christian Vetteris for the rest of that half season, but the team eventually switched to a Dallara chassis and the Ligier project was abandoned. There wasn't much wrong with the JS47, it was just that Dallara was completely dominant in the market, and it didn't make any financial sense for Ligier to back the car and develop it to fight Dallara when there was only a single customer team, and more customers wouldn't come unless Ligier put that development into the car, and it just didn't come. Lola also faced the same issues. Ligier's other new project, the JS49 sports car, proved to be a huge success, and its sports car racing revival continues to this day, and Ligier has LMP3 cars, there's a new LMP2 car on the way, and its chassis formed the basis of the Lamborghini LMDH car. Today, the sole JS47 is painted green, and it competes in hill climbing. It still has a 2-litre Opel engine. Formula 3 never had another oval race. Foster's crash had raised safety concerns, and the cost of developing the cars to meet oval safety standards was felt to be too high when only one championship wanted to race on an oval, and most of the teams and drivers even in that championship did not want to race on an oval. If you've enjoyed this curious tale of turning left at high speed in Germany while driving a French car, then please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon on Pit Road, or, as this is a European themed video, Pit Lane, maybe. Let me know in the comments.
Dass man hier nicht wegfahren kann. Jetzt wird man das Rennen ein klein wenig taktischer, nicht einteilen. Jetzt wird man versuchen, nicht immer miteinander zu kämpfen in den ersten Runden, sondern man wird versuchen, jetzt muss ich halt Luft holen, meine Güte, man wird versuchen, für das letzte Drittel wird man hier anfangen zu kämpfen und richtig zu fighten. Jetzt geht es im Mittelfeld los, ein klein wenig